Coming up on this Wednesday edition of Newsline at noon, a South Korean passenger ferry with some 450 people on board is sinking off the country's southwest coast. Rescue operations are underway. Officials from Seoul and Tokyo meet to find a solution to a dispute over Japan's wartime sexual enslavement of Korean women. This is the first time the two nations have held talks solely focused on this issue. Plus, Ukraine launches a special operation against pro-Russian militants. Russian President Vladimir Putin says the worsening conflict is putting Ukraine on the brink of civil war. These stories and more on Newsline at noon.
Thanks for joining us. You're watching Newsline at noon. I'm Jeju in Seoul.
Very good to have you with us. I'm Mark Broom. Our top story at this hour. A passenger ferry is sinking off the southwestern coast of Korea. The ship was carrying almost 500 people.
Right. For the latest, we connect live to our Connie Kim at the Arirang News Center. Connie, fill us in.
Yes, Mark. We're getting conflicting reports at this hour about the number of passengers who have been rescued. What we do know is the Saewolho liner was carrying some 470 passengers, 325 of which were high school students on their way to Jeju Island on a field trip. At around 9 this Wednesday morning, the ship's crew sent out distress warning signals that it was sinking some 20 kilometers off the coast of Jindo Island in southwestern Korea. The South Korean Navy in just the past few minutes has reported that one person has died in the incident and that around 161 passengers on board the ship has been rescued.
So, Connie, what do we know about what happened to this ship and what kind of efforts are being made by the government to rescue the passengers?
Well, experts say the ship isn't sinking but is rather capsizing. 90% of the vessel is said to be underwater. The Navy's ship salvage unit and underwater demolition team are taking part in the rescue operations, along with 13 naval vessels and at least one naval helicopter. President Park Geun-hye has ordered that all Navy, Coast Guard, and nearby vessels fully utilize their personnel, equipment, and rescue ships to help with the efforts.
And any reports on the cause of the accident?
Well, although the exact cause of the accident is unclear, officials from the Oceans Ministry says there is a high possibility that the passenger ship ran into a rock due to foggy weather. Authorities say the water temperature right now stands at around 12 degrees Celsius. They add that people can survive in waters at that temperature for about 2 hours. Everyone on board reportedly is wearing life jackets while they wait for rescue. We'll continue to monitor the situation and report on any new developments, while of course wishing for the best.
Okay, Connie, thank you very much for your report. And like you say, we really do hope that this turns out okay and most, if not everyone, gets pulled out safely. Now, Korea and Japan will hold their first working-level talks on the so-called comfort women issue in Seoul later today.
But as our Hwang Seung-hee tells us, it will take much more than one meeting to mend decades of sour ties.
Senior officials from Korea and Japan will meet in Seoul Wednesday as they seek to resolve the long-standing dispute over Japan's wartime sexual enslavement of Korean women. The rare meeting is the result of an agreement reached ahead of President Park Geun-hye's first official talks with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe in the Netherlands last month. Korea is expected to reiterate its demand for an official apology and legal compensation from Japan for the so-called comfort women. Tokyo claims the issue was settled through a 1965 treaty signed by the two neighbors when they normalized diplomatic ties. But a report by Kyodo News Agency Wednesday on a meeting between Japanese and Korean officials in Tokyo in February suggests a shift in Japan's attitude. At the meeting, Japan reportedly said it wants to resolve the comfort women issue before next year, which is the 50th anniversary of the two countries normalizing their diplomatic ties. The report also said the Japanese government is reviewing various humanitarian measures, including providing government support funds for the victims and an official apology by the Japanese ambassador to Korea. Tokyo is reportedly even mulling the possibility of issuing a letter to the comfort women under the prime minister's name. Around 200,000 women, mostly Korean, were forced to serve the Japanese army in comfort stations during the early 20th century. But most agree that just one round of talks will not be enough for the two neighbors to overcome decades of diplomatic tensions. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
The top nuclear envoys of China and the United States have wrapped up their second day of talks in New York on ways to resume the long-stalled six-party talks on denuclearizing North Korea.
Both sides are playing their cards close to their chest in regards to the details, but Washington says the dialogue has been productive. Kim Ji-yeon has the details.
Chinese nuclear envoy Wu Da-wei and his U.S. counterpart Glenn Davies met for the second time this week to discuss ways to lure North Korea back to the six-party talks on its own denuclearization. In a statement Tuesday, the U.S. State Department said the talks had been productive and both sides had agreed on the fundamental importance of a denuclearized North Korea. The Chinese delegate did not comment about the closed-door meeting. Diplomatic sources in the United Nations were paying close attention to whether Wu would propose an arbitration plan on the human rights issue in North Korea. Pyongyang threatened to conduct a fourth nuclear test if the international community crossed the line by bringing up the regime's human rights abuses. The Chinese delegation spent 5 days in Pyongyang last month and has reportedly drawn up an arbitration plan that contains the North Korean stance on the matter. Wu and Davies will hold the third and last meeting in Washington on Friday. The meeting comes as Beijing's foreign ministry issued a rare statement Tuesday, saying it's opposed to any move that may result in tensions in the region, whether they be joint drills between South Korea and the U.S. or North Korea's threat of conducting further nuclear tests. It also urged all related parties to make joint efforts to ease the situation and said China would continue to play a positive role in promoting peace and stability in the region. The six-party talks made up of South Korea, China, the U.S., Russia, and Japan were suspended after North Korea walked out of them in 2008. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
High-level military officials from South Korea and the U.S. are in Washington for 2 days of meetings, which started on Tuesday. Now, aside from the North Korean threat, the two sides are trying to hammer out when and under what conditions Washington will hand over wartime operational control to Seoul. Ji Myung-gil has more.
South Korea and the U.S. opened a high-level military meeting at the Pentagon on Tuesday local time, with North Korea and pending alliance issues topping the agenda. The two-day integrated defense dialogue began with Seoul requesting for another delay in the transfer of wartime operational control from the U.S. to South Korea. Seoul is currently scheduled to regain wartime operational control in 2015, but the government says the nation's military needs more time to prepare for the transfer. The two sides have reportedly agreed in principle on a delay due to the ongoing threat posed by North Korea, but the exact timing and other details are still being ironed out. The allies will sit down with Japan for defense trilateral talks starting Thursday. Back here in Seoul, lawmakers plan to pass a defense cost-sharing pact with the U.S. at Wednesday's plenary session. In January, Seoul and Washington renewed the special measure agreement that lays out the cost each side pays for stationing the 28,500 U.S. troops on South Korean soil. Under the deal, South Korea will pay some $880 million annually from this year through 2018, a 5.8% increase from last year. Approval of the pact had been delayed, which sparked concerns that South Korean employees of U.S. Forces Korea would be forced to take unpaid leave and that affiliated firms would have to suspend operations. Ji Myung-gil, Arirang News.
High performance at a low cost is an attractive combination for any product. That formula has helped Korea's homegrown Fa-50 fighter jet find a number of homes in the international market in recent years and is expected to find even more going forward. Our Shin Se-min reports.
Its original purpose was to serve as Korea's own light combat aircraft, but it's finding a home in the international market. The FA-50 is a light attack variant of the T-50 Golden Eagle supersonic advanced jet trainer operated by the South Korean Air Force. Co-developed by Korea Aerospace Industries and U.S. defense firm Lockheed Martin, the FA-50 is capable of combat action with advanced radar and missile capabilities. The FA-50 was initially designed to replace the nation's aging fighter jets, while the T-50 supersonic trainer jets were aimed for the international market. However, the T-50's price tag of over $22 million was a bit too high for many buyers, and it didn't sell as well as anticipated. But the remodeled FA-50 has filled its place. Capable of carrying 4,500 kilograms of weapons, the jet is in the same class as others made in Sweden, Italy, and Russia. But Korea's FA-50 is becoming more attractive because of its high performance in relation to cost. Korea Aerospace Industries signed a contract to deliver 12 fighter jets to the Philippines worth of $420 million in March. It follows similar deals to Iraq last year and Indonesia in 2011. Sights have now been set on Peru, Botswana, and the United Arab Emirates and the U.S., which may be looking to replace its aging Air Force T-38s. Korea Aerospace Industries and Lockheed Martin signed a memorandum of understanding on expanding defense cooperation in February of last year. Industry experts expect a deal on FA-50 exports with the U.S. Air Force sometime in 2017. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Earlier this month, Japan lifted a self-imposed ban on arms exports that dated back some 5 decades. The Abe administration has been pushing to strengthen Japan's military capabilities, and potential buyers are already lining up to buy what the country has to offer. Song Ji-son reports.
A half-a-century-long ban on Japan's arms export has been lifted to help the nation beef up its weapons industry and self-defense capabilities. Japan's post-World War II constitution, drawn up in 1967, banned the country from waging war. Japan's cabinet says the country's arms exports will be monitored closely. Weapons will not be transferred to countries that violate international treaties or UN Security Council resolutions, and arms exports are only allowed if they contribute to peace or Japan's national security. Less than a week after easing its arms export regulations, Japan signed an agreement with Australia to jointly develop submarines while sealing a free trade deal. And plenty more foreign buyers are lining up. According to Japanese daily Nihon Keizai last week, officials from France and Britain have already paid visits to defense contractors like Mitsubishi and Kawasaki Heavy Industries. Tokyo is also likely to transfer weapons to Southeast Asian countries in similar situations with territorial disputes with China to bolster support on the issue.
The major goal of developing weapons is to arm the nation's own army. But when you also export the weapons, you can arm them at a lower cost because of the increased sales, and at the same time acquire a partially controlling power over the country that imports your weapons.
The world's top exporters, the United States and Russia, make up more than half of the world's weapons providers combined. Other leaders include Germany, France, and Britain, along with China, which is now the world's 5th largest arms exporter. But with Japan now in the mix, experts say it's now only a matter of time before the country emerges as one of the top players. Song Ji-son, Arirang News.
Rigorous spending aimed at revitalizing the local economy is on the mind of Korea's top economic policymaker. At a ministerial level meeting Wednesday, Finance Minister Hyun Oh-suk said the government will accelerate its rate of spending in the first half of the year. The government had originally planned to spend 55% of this year's budget allocated for the finance sector by June. But Hyun said more would be funneled into the second quarter, especially towards the country's small and mid-sized companies. The government executed 24% of the budget in the January to March period. Noting that economic conditions in the investment and private sectors have not fully picked up, Hyun said the government would continue to monitor external uncertainties such as the slowdown in the Chinese economy. Now, as a means of boosting employment, small and mid-sized Korean companies that create more full-time jobs will be exempt from an annual tax audit. The National Tax Service said Wednesday that the incentive will be for companies with revenue of less than $28 million and particularly for those hiring young people. The government on Tuesday also unveiled a set of other measures to tackle the nation's low youth employment rate, which stood at 39.7% last year, far below the OECD average of 50%. Companies will have their benefits removed if there are any signs of tax evasion. Time now for a look through the international headlines we're following at this hour. Let's connect live to our Eunice Kim, who's standing by at the news center.
Eunice, tensions are escalating in Ukraine. Ukraine's armed forces retook a small airport as Kiev formally launches its anti-terror operation against pro-Russian forces.
That's right, Jeju, and Ukraine's military are said to be on their way to those flashpoint cities in eastern Ukraine, causing some to worry the country could be on its way to civil war. Here's Connie Lee with more.
Heavy gunfire and fighter jets were heard and seen swooping over an airfield in East Ukraine. Authorities say Ukrainian armed forces retook a military airfield from pro-Russian forces on Tuesday. It was a first formal military action by Ukraine against pro-Russian militants.
The main purpose of these actions is to protect Ukrainian citizens to stop terrorism, crime, and attempts to tear apart our country.
Witnesses say Ukrainian troops stepped out of military helicopters in a heavy pro-Russian area of Kramatorsk. Despite the gunfire, though, locals have not confirmed casualties as reported by Russian media. And around the same time, a similar operation of Ukrainian army troops and special forces were deployed in a nearby city of Slavyansk to take back control of government buildings there. Russia says Ukraine is on the brink of a civil war and has asked the United Nations to condemn Kiev's latest military operation. However, the UN Secretary General's press office said that Ban Ki-moon spoke on the phone with Russian President Vladimir Putin on Tuesday and requested that all parties calm the situation.
The Secretary General is gravely concerned by the disturbances currently ongoing in eastern Ukraine. He has called on all parties to do their utmost to try to de-escalate the situation and avoid further violence.
The U.S. also spoke out, saying Ukraine's government has a responsibility to respond to provocations in its country, but added that Washington was not considering sending arms to Kiev. Connie Lee, Arirang News.
We'll turn to Nigeria next, where as many as 200 teenage girls were kidnapped by heavily armed Islamic militants hours after a bus explosion killed more than 70 there. The abduction took place late Monday night at a boarding school in the northeastern state of Borno. Boko Haram gunmen engaged in a firefight with soldiers guarding the school, killing 2 before loading the girls into waiting trucks, vans, and buses. Some of the girls escaped when their vehicle broke down. The raid does come as the leader of Boko Haram had threatened such an abduction in a video released late last month. Schools were closed down, but the girls had returned to take their final exams. Meanwhile, Nigeria's capital, Abuja, is set to host a World Economic Forum on Africa next month. President Goodluck Jonathan said he will deploy more than 6,000 police and soldiers to protect the high-level participants. A whaling group in Japan says it will resume what it calls scientific whaling in the Antarctic despite a judgment by a UN court last month to halt the country's decades-old program. Court papers filed in the U.S. show that Kyoto Senpaku intends to continue hunts in future seasons under a modified program. It noted the Japanese government has yet to grant permits for the next season. Japan's Chief Cabinet Secretary Yoshihide Suga said the government is analyzing the content of the International Court of Justice's decision and will make its decision in due time. And in India, the country's Supreme Court has legally recognized transgender people as a third gender. The landmark ruling on Tuesday grants the transgender community the same basic rights as other Indian citizens in a move that seeks to end centuries of discrimination. Activists welcome the sweeping verdict as it will include all groups such as transsexuals, cross-dressers, and eunuchs. India's Law Minister Kapil Sibal said the judgment would help the transgender community overcome social and economic challenges. About 2 million transgender people are estimated to live in India.
Stay up to date on the latest news out of Korea. Connecting to our team of reporters about the issues that matter to Korea. On air, on your mobile, online. Find out more about Korea on Newsline at Noon with Mark Broom and Jinju.
Market researcher, strategy analytics, and Thursday that LG Electronics brought in about.
Boston Strong is the phrase the world became familiar with 1 year ago when twin bombings ripped through crowds gathered near the finish line of the Boston Marathon.
3 people died in the attack, and on Tuesday the city rallied together to remember them and the scores of others who were injured. Gwon-soa reports.
On April 15, 2013, 2 bombs exploded at the finish line of the world-famous Boston Marathon, killing 3 and wounding 264 others. A year has now passed since that horrific day, and its survivors walked the final stretch of the marathon on a rainy Tuesday local time, along with dignitaries and scores of other people to remember the worst terror attack in the United States since 9/11. The event took place under high security, and police found suspicious bags at the scene, which they detonated in a precautionary measure. There is no evidence that the bags contained explosives. Earlier in the day, thousands of people gathered at an indoor anniversary where the message was, "Boston remains strong."
You are Boston strong. We have never, ever, ever yielded to fear.
I think of the lessons that we have learned and have had to relearn, that no milestone is too small to celebrate. Even walking into a non-handicapped bathroom stall for the first time doing a happy dance.
Adrienne Haslett-Davis, a dancer, lost her lower left leg in the bombings, but due to a high-tech prosthetic, she is back to dancing. There are many more remarkable stories of recovery like hers. However, the emotional damage remains in the form of anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress. But the survivors have one thing in common: they are thankful to be alive. Under heightened security, the next Boston Marathon will take place on April 22nd. Gwon-soa, Arirang News.
Patients who suffer from chronic diseases like heart disease or stroke often worry that they might find themselves in a precarious situation where help is out of reach.
But smart technology is stepping in to fill the gap to ensure that help is never that far off. Sun Jung-in reports.
An asthmatic patient suddenly has difficulty breathing and drops down in the middle of the street. A passerby rushes over and checks her medical condition by tagging his smartphone to the patient's wristband. The emergency services arrive and the paramedics get all the information they need before taking the patient to the hospital. This so-called life tag wristband contains crucial information including the patient's condition or ailment and the correct emergency response procedures. The information is sent to the smartphone user just by tagging the device next to the wristband. Patients who suffer from rare diseases or are chronically or critically ill can benefit from the system upon request.
There are occasions when we cannot perform the right procedure because we lack medical information about the patient. This new system will help us give the patient the proper treatment.
The wristband also sends the wearer's exact location so the emergency response team can find the person right away. However, the system is being unveiled slowly as it deals with personal medical information that is shared between emergency treatment centers and fire authorities.
Security and protection must be assured. For our part, we will take extra caution to make sure personal data is kept safe.
The government plans to implement a pilot service from December and expand the service to those who need the most, such as senior citizens who live alone. Son Jung-in, Arirang News.
Well, warm temperatures continue, but it will be hard to see the sun due to that unwelcome visitor we're seeing more often these days, toxic dust. Almost the entire nation is under toxic smog right now, and it should remain like this until the late afternoon. In fact, an ultra-fine dust advisor was issued in Seoul and Busan, so don't forget to have a face mask with you before heading out. But the dust should completely clear out tomorrow as we have rain in the forecast starting in the morning in the south before it spreads to the entire nation by the afternoon. With that, here are the readings for today. Seoul will get up to 21, the high in Daegu will soar to 27, and Gwangju and Busan should top out at 23. Now for other regions, down on Jeju will hike up to 19, Daejeon peaks at 24, and Mount Kumgang should see a high of 15 in the afternoon. Well, that's all for me today, and back to you guys in the studio.
And those are the stories we're following at this hour. Stay tuned to Arirang for the latest updates on the ferry that is sinking off Korea's southwestern island of Jindo.
We do hope for the best and that everyone is rescued safely. Jindo and I will be back at the same time tomorrow. Thank you for watching.